What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. We're going to do another Lost Records video. Of course, we're doing Lost Records video. There's a lot of Lost Records news in a minute. So we'll get into this in a moment. But if you are new here, as always, please do consider dropping subscribe on the channel, turn on notifications, like the video, and share with your friends. Helps you support the channel, helps you keep up to date with the channel. I wouldn't ask if we didn't care that much. And also StrangeCast. And yes, we do a lot of Lost Records content. We do a lot of Life is Strange content. We do podcasts on both of them, which I was about to do them with a StrangeCast introduction. We do StrangeCast, which is our bi-weekly Life is Strange Deck 9 Don't Nod podcast. It's kind of evolved into its own thing. And then also we have the Lost Records Journal, which is a monthly podcast for the moment, which we cover Lost Records news. So I decided to do this video because, and thank you to everyone who watched my reaction video. I really enjoyed doing that. It was a quick turnaround that I had to do it on, but I'm glad you all enjoyed it. And then also it got really good feedback. And then also for you guys to all enjoy the trailer as well, because it was great. And I've kind of come down a little bit since the trailer, not the hype, but just like the thrill ride that we got off that, because it was just really good to see it. Well, basically, I thought I'd do this video because I don't know how long this is going to go on for. I think we're going to record StrangeCast on the weekend, me and Adam, but it's like there's so many interviews from Lost Records devs, so I'm kind of like trying to juggle them. So I've kind of basically taken two of them out from StrangeCast, doing them here as a video so we can kind of talk about them. I'll just give my feedback, and then obviously with Adam we'll kind of go through the other ones, if anything, but I thought I'd just kind of give my 2 cents on what I've seen and read so far. So obviously there's like loads of interviews at the minute, and then there's also video interviews as well. I think there's one with Gaming Trend, and then also Shack News, I think it is. So it's like, go and watch those. But I thought we'd kind of do the two that I spoke about in the reaction video, which was, I think, Kotaku and Games Radar, because they were kind of published within like minutes of like, the trailer going out. So obviously the devs had spoken to them. So let's have a look at what we actually get from here. We'll kind of run through it, and I'll just give you what my 2 cents are from what we obviously heard from them. So it seems like we're getting more details, if anything. So this is going to go to Kotaku. I'm going to skip some of the extra filler stuff. So I'm just going to go to this part which we're talking about Lost Records time skip. So obviously we know there's a time jump. And we're going to put here, Kotaku said, before time skip, Lost Records follows a group of teenage friends in the 90s, including a camera-toting protagonist Swann Koch, Michel Koch, who's Life is Strange 1 and 2 co-director, who's the game director on Lost Records Bloomer Age, and also the creative, I think he's the creative studio director at Don't Know Montreal, has spoken here. Says Koch points out that several members of Don't Know's team grew up in the decade, and that the game's depiction of the 90s is, quote unquote, more like nostalgic version of the 90s were, end quote, than an airtight reaction. By using time skip and playing with the distance between its characters past and present, Koch says the studio wants to examine how we reflect on the teenage experience in adulthood using the time period the team members are most familiar with. And I quote from Michel, as we grow older, we wanted to start focus on what is group up, what is to be an adult in the later stages in our lives. And so basically characters in the Lost Records Bloomer Age are really our own age. Like when you play Swann in the present time, she's 43. Yeah. And you go into her memories in 1995 when she was 16. It's allowed us not only to talk about teenage, but also to reflect on what teenagers do, what teenagers think, with the lens of an adult. So obviously we know about the time skip, quite big that maybe they're not millennials. I think would they be Gen X? I think there would be these guys with these kids. I know that Michel and Luc are a little bit older than me, just a little bit. So yeah, it's kind of experience. Obviously, I think we're all excited, and it kind of makes me feel so that the 90s is being used as a setting for my childhood. But anyway, we'll continue. So, what kind of adult Swann has become in 27 years between the past and present will be determined by player choice. And Koch says the framing has given Don't Nod room to explore adult feelings and how one looks back on their youth. Lost Records starts with Swann and her friends meeting again after almost 3 decades. Oh, so it starts with as it pivots through periods of flashbacks. You make decisions to flesh out the specifics of the group's dynamics and determine if old grudges and flames die with age and wisdom. It also notably follows a group of middle-aged women who are seldom the stars of video games. So Michel said here, and I quote, "You're going to this reunion evening when you will meeting long lost friends you haven't seen for 27 years, and you will have to play the game to recreate the reason. Why did you not see them for 27 years? Why do you have to meet them today? It's all part of recreating story with choices and consequences. How does it feel to reconnect with long lost friends? Can you still be close with them? Are you strangers? And so not only talking about those teenagers, we're talking about 27 years later, how to reflect on things, maybe stupid things as teenagers. So yeah, it's quite potent, that. And it seems to give us a little bit more detail on what to expect from Lost Records. Obviously, the diner kind of reminds me again of like It, the It sequel, where they kind of like go back and they kind of meet up all the friends from that group, and it's like, they kind of reunite to because Pennywise is back. It does give me that kind of eerie dynamic. And also as well, like, the fact that we start as the adults and it's kind of like jumping back to flashbacks and that's dictating the game, which isn't anything like we've seen before from them, which will be an interesting dynamic. I do wonder how that's going to really play out, because I had a feeling about this and I had a bit of reflection, and I want to talk to Adam about this. It's kind of like, it feels quite Telltale-y, but also a bit more significantly Telltale-y, because like Life is Strange 1 and 2 have choice and consequences, but it's always been like with those games, illusion of choice. So like a lot of the decisions don't really have that much merit on the game. So it's like, obviously, like, for example, if Kate dies in the first Life is Strange, but it doesn't have necessarily a longer impact on the story, because it's like, it's just a choice at the end of the day. And it's the same with like other things that happen, even like the more significant moments. So for example, like pulling Chloe's ventilator as well, for example. Like the only game defining choice you really have that is significantly impactful in the first Life is Strange is obviously the end choice, because that dictates the outcome of something. It's not like permadeath situations where you have like with Detroit Become Human and other games. I think like the Council I've always recommended for episodic, like that there's choice and consequences which sometimes shatter the illusion of choice, and Telltale games used to have that, where it's like there's a lot of illusion of choice with some of the choices. But with this, it's kind of like, the game is fixed with this kind of like this outer narrative, which is like, the adults are reunited, and then it's like it's letting you define how the story plays out, which is quite an interesting way of like meriting out. And I'm quite intrigued by the way that they're going to play this out in the actual at the actual game. So quite interesting observation, and I'm quite I wonder how it works in the two parts, because we know the game is built into two parts. So that's quite interesting, and hopefully there's like a big cliffhanger after the end of the first part, which obviously, knowing their credit, and especially with the first Life is Strange that we had so many good cliffhangers. But I think like, yeah, I do wonder how that plays out, and how you're going to like jump through past sequences whilst being adults. That's quite interesting there. But anyway, I'll go to the end of the part of this piece, which is not long anyway. So it's, on top of dealing with adult problems, Koch says, I don't want to examine how we as adults deconstruct the way teenagers think with Lost Records. So while it might not be a Life is Strange sequel, it feels in conversation with how those games and most teen-centric media made by adults portray the adolescent experience. Michel said, and I quote, "We hear a lot of people say, oh, quote unquote, oh, those teenagers are cringe, end quote. And we were cringe as teenagers. The interesting thing is, we know it as adults. We didn't know it back then as teenagers, and here in our game, we can actually have both. Even when we're working on Life is Strange, we knew that some of the lines some players would say, "Why, quote unquote, why did they say that?" End quote. But it feels real because we were very stupid. We were teenagers, so we are kind of playing with that now with this game, because we have 2 points of view simultaneously. It really allow us to, even in 1995, you could say something really stupid, really harmful things, or things that you don't mind that the adults can really reflect on. Oh yeah, we were really stupid back then. That is a kind of dynamic we can have between adults and teenagers in Lost Records Boom Rage, which is an interesting way of thinking about it. Because obviously, like, I covered that first Life is Strange game, and I remember reviewing, was it from episode 3? I think I reviewed it from, and like the critics, and every single time it was always like the dialogue is cringe, and it was like unanimous. It seemed to be like every critic was saying the same thing, and like even I think I questioned some of the dialogue choice myself in that when I was reviewing it, but it felt like there was kind of question marks with it. But I feel like maybe they've kind of got a good balance here, and kind of like a good way of curving certain things, where it's like, you do have that option to kind of reflect on what would be poor choice of like maybe dialogue, or like how things are presented as cringe, because they are cringe. It's going to be cringe. It's like, young teen kids. It's like there's no way inherently not making it cringe. It's going to have to be cringe. That's how people act. Even when we were kids, it's you act cringe. But it's like, I think always, like, in my mind, if you act cringe, it's not as bad as like when you see it in the media. For some reason in the media it's amplified, and maybe that's not because it's personal experience, and maybe it's because you're watching it and you're like thinking that I would never say that. But interesting nonetheless, though, that he's got that kind of perspective. So that's the entire piece from Kotaku. Actually, it's not as long as I thought it would be, but little tidbits of information. Obviously, the kind of time jump is important. We know that's going to happen. Obviously, we have more of an elder elder Gen X millennial kind of like group of like kids here, because obviously they're young, they're like 16, 15 in like 1995, and I was like, 3 at that point. So like they kind of like seeing it as the experience that you're, a young adult in the 90s having grown up with that. So and then obviously we get into late adulthood, and I think like if anything we kind of realize that the adult story doesn't seem like it's going to have the full precedent. I think it's just basically going to, it seems like it's going to determine the outcomes that have already happened in the past. So I'm kind of intrigued by that. I thought maybe the adult scenarios had a bit more weight. I thought maybe that we even have the 2 parts, and the adult chapter is one, and then you also the young, but it seems like you're playing as young characters for the majority of it. And then I think like it might even do that thing where it's like you cut from like, them talking at the table or something, wherever they are, and it cuts back to obviously the scene. So it's kind of like a chapter built structure or something in that. I don't know. I'm just kind of like theorizing at this point. But no, I did find it quite interesting. I do find that part really interesting where he talks about the reunion evening, how it talks about there, where it says Lost Records starts with Swann, so obviously we know Swann's the main character anyway, and her friends meeting again almost 3 decades as it pivots between periods through flashbacks. You'll make decisions to flesh out the specifics of the group's dynamics and determine if old grudges and flames die with age and wisdom. Which again, like I think we kind of got that from all the interviews and the content that we covered from Lost Records on StrangeCast for that part of 3 years, where they've been feeding us information that it seems like the narrative is going to keep shifting, and it's all about building these really close relationships, which I think I'm really thankful for Adam saying this as well. And if you haven't played it, go and play Oxenfree, because it's giving me big Oxenfree vibes, this, if anything, where it's like the relationship structure seems really important with characters. And maybe it's like the next evolution of like episodic gaming, and maybe more so from Don't Nod, where you're basically going to have more weighted relationships. I feel like that with Final Fantasy Rebirth. If anyone's played, I'm not going to try and spoil it, but obviously there's like character relationship mechanics in there, the way you interact with people. So I feel like there's almost all of a sudden like quite a bit of a heavy emphasis on storytelling, characters having close relationships. So that's the Kotaku piece. Go and do read it as well. This has just been Michel from this. Surprising, I thought like Luc and Frederica in here, but apparently not. But yeah, just very few bits of detail. And again, like I know that other things have been revealed in all the other interviews. As I said, like we'll get to them in the period of like the month. We'll try and crack through them. But I found them quite interesting, his perspective. And I think like if anything, that dialogue part where they're talking about like teenagers dialogue and reflecting is such a good way to kind of like I don't know what to say. It's like an excuse, like to kind of get over the thing. I think it's like it's a very smart way of integrating what was very much criticism towards the first Life is Strange, because I do expect this game to be quite cringe in terms of the dialogue, just because it's again like you can't eliminate it. It's like you're playing as 16, 15-year-old girls in like America, and it's like and in itself as well, the vocabulary's changed. So I'd be interested to hear like Michel's perspective. And one day, maybe if he comes on here, one day we can ask him about this. But it's like how the dialogue is written for Gen Z, for example, and then or Gen Z actually. I says it Gen Z. I'm British, I'm not Z. But like how it's written for Gen Z, because I know that the clientele here is like Gen X millennial teenagers in the 1990s. But again, it's like the eyes and the products are going to be placed on on Gen Z. Gen Z is going to watch this game, and like in itself as well, we're coming towards the end of Gen Alpha. Gen Beta comes along, and then it's like Gen Alpha will get older enough, and then they're going to have to see it through their optics. And it's also it's just interesting, because I know that I think it was Desiree and Nina who were brought on to kind of help with Jean-Luc and Michel do the dialogue, and kind of like work on the writing side. But it's like I do wonder about their ages. Are they part of Gen Z? Like, are they young Gen Z? Are they millennials? Like, how do their age factors in? So it's like all quite interesting. It's very interesting. Like you can see it as well. Like I think Lost Records might be hitting a lot more home with people, because obviously, like if you're my age or if you're Adam's age, well, Adam's only a couple of years older than me, but if you're like our age or you're like Luc Michel's age, it's like this is your kind of like wheelhouse. It feels quite homey, if anything. So I do wonder, and if you are like someone younger as well, for like different like age range, do let me know what you think about it, because I'm quite interested about how they're going to present dialogue and how it's going to come across, because again, like it has to feel 90s as well. Like if you go into the 1990s, we need that kind of like bit of raw style dialogue that we had in the 1990s. It's like you can see in the films you watch and TV shows, it might be dated now and people might be like quite caught off by it, but it's like that was the kind of the way that people spoke back then as well. So it was like it wasn't as different as it is now for a lot of people, or like from a different generation. So as I said, Kotaku, go and read it. You can check it out. So that's one of the interviews we're going to cross off. And again, I don't think we'll bring this up with Adam. Again, there's so many different interviews that are out there that you can go and watch with these guys or read, and they're all giving you different information. But I thought I'd box this one off here for this video. So let me know what you think of what Michel said in that. And anyway, we'll move on to the next one, which is on Games Radar. So this was by Heather Wald, which is Life is Strange devs talk Lost Records, Bloom and Rage's protagonist, story and choices. Quote unquote, looking at the world is a big part of the interactivity in our game, end quote. So I'm going to move through this. So, right, as the trailer winds down, we end up being introduced to the person being behind the camcorder who's documenting her summer, Bloom and Rage's protagonist, Swann Holloway. So this was Michel again, who said, and I quote, "As you can see with the trailer, like we did with previous protagonists, Max in Life is Strange was using a camera. Sean in Life is Strange, she was drawing. For Swann, she's filming around the world with a camcorder. That's something we really like to do for our protagonists, to give them a way to look at the world that makes sense, but also from a gameplay perspective, because looking at the world is a big part of our interactivity in our game. You walk through the environments, you interact with environments, with characters, and we love to give you the tool to interact with those. So with Swann, we'll talk more about this detail in future, about how exactly camcorder works, but it was a big part of the gameplay of the game. You can really record and use a camcorder for storytelling for various things, which is interesting because like the only thing that I can really remember, and I think other people have mentioned this, I'm not having some epiphany moment, but like the one that's really hits home with a camcorder in a game is Outlast. If you played the Outlast, it was quite terrifying and quite chilling. This is the first experience playing that. It was very like, oh, it's like, it's a very good horror game. Had some flaws, it went very David Cage towards the end, but like it was a really enjoyable experience. The camcorder was such a good part of that because obviously you had like manuscripts you could film that you had to pick up from it. The kind of like the fact that the lights would turn off, you had the camcorder, the battery. So I do wonder how they're going to really integrate this into the game, like how it's going to play out. I think like, I hope there's kind of like, little details you miss, like even if it's like detective work. We've seen it in the first Life is Strange when Max and Chloe have that board trying to suss out where the dark room is. It's like, I hope we have like the camcorder reveals like little details that you could potentially miss, or you can kind of like reference back to and you collect information, build stuff. It's quite nice to have it as a core mechanic, and like it's nice to see that again. It's like a spiritual evolution of Life is Strange, where it's like, they kind of have this emphasis with the like, Life is Strange one's Max's her camera. You had it with Sean with his like, notebooks, and they were kind of like they were more kind of like focused on just like the collectibles, if anything. That was like a big collectible mechanic, if anything, if I remember correctly with those. So it's like, I think again the camcorder will probably have collectibles. It would make sense that we'll get from that, but I'd like to see it, if it integrates anything more as well, because like the camcorder is such a cool component. Like again, Outlast was good for it, and then it's not necessarily camcorder, but it's Resident Evil 7. I really love Resident Evil 7. Think about that game a lot. It's a really interesting game that I played that. But it's like the videotapes. Like the videotapes were some of the best parts of that game with Clancy, when you're in the videotapes and you're like reliving these experiences. I think there's something quite harrowing with that, and something a bit more, there's something quite meaty with what you get from a game. So quite interesting to see like this is what's going to give Swann quite a big part of her story. And again, I think like I would like it to be like even more choice and consequence driven, like we spoke about in the last article, about like, it being it feels maybe like a bit of a telltale game here and there, but it's like I really hope that if you miss something, you miss something. So it's like, again, you play Detroit, you miss something, like in the scene with Connor, in his opening scene with the hostage sequence, you miss something, you can't go back to it, you won't unlock the kind of like the hidden detail. And I think like Telltale games start to do that, especially with the Walking Dead later seasons. Like if you missed a part of like something, I think there's like in the 4th season, it's like a code or something that you can say to someone, and it makes you go through the ship easier. Bit of spoiler, but anyway, yeah, if you haven't played Telltale, go and play Telltale. It's great. But yeah, all quite interesting to hear that from about Swann, if anything. And again, like it seems like there's going to be a focus on it. We saw it in the trailer. We kind of sussed out that Swann was going to be the main character. There's so much emphasis put on the camcorder, and even again in the lo-fi trailer, it's put a big emphasis on it, which we'll come on to in the breakdown at some point when I do that at some point in the trailer breakdown. We have that kind of like, I think like people have kind of said like, when she's filming Nora falls over and she's like, oh, it's like, is it a love moment? Is it start of like those relationships? For me, it's kind of like, I think that's the shot that starts that relationship, like their friendship, if anything. It's like, because I think like she's a deep introvert, as they keep talking about in some of the other articles and stuff. But it's like, I think like that's the kind of thing that catches someone's eye. It's like she's filming her and it's like they become friends. who knows? But interesting nonetheless. I thought it was quite an interesting perspective. And again, I look forward to see what they do with the camera. Camera seems to be the rage. Aperture was an interesting rumor, wasn't it? There was a camera in that. I do wonder what's going on here. Anyway, so we'll carry on here. Lost Records Bloom and Rage follows the story of our four friends, Swann, Autumn, Nora, and Kat, who spend the summer together in 1995. As they hang out in Velvet Cove and begin to bond, something happens that changes everything. We won't discover what exactly that something is until the game releases later this year, but it's enough to stop them speaking to one another for 27 years. Something, isn't it? As with the creators behind Life is Strange, the team at Don't Nod are no strangers to bringing relatable characters and likewise helping us form a connection to them as players. The group all have own distinct personalities that will either bring them closer together or make them clash depending on your choices. As Swann, who Koch describes as a quote-unquote positive introvert, end quote, meaning that she doesn't see the introversion quote unquote as a flaw or something that has to overcome. So Michel said, and I quote, "She's perfectly happy to be alone at the beginning of the game by just going to the woods, using a camera, filming things around her, talking with animals. She likes to spend her time alone. She loves her me time, basically. But what's interesting is that she will meet those other girls, Nora, Autumn, and Kat, and she'll discover that having friends can bring a lot of things that she didn't know she could experience," end quote. Just like Don't Nod's previous games, Swann's story will put an emphasis on relationships, but where Life is Strange 2, 1 and 2 focused on bonds between central characters, Bloom and Rage is instead exploring the dynamics of a group and how links between Swann, Nora, Autumn, and Kat can alter our past as we navigate the adventure. And Michel said, and I quote, "We really wanted to focus on group dynamics, not only having two characters like in our previous game, but having four characters because the group dynamic is very different. Something very different, sorry. When you find the group, it can clearly make you stronger. It can make you be a squad, a pack against adversity, but you can also be pushed to do things you you wouldn't do yourself, or maybe that's even against your core beliefs and you have to take a stand. Do you follow the group, or do you take a stand against the group? Do you accept peer pressure? It's never easy to say to your friends that they're wrong, for example, and that's something that's really interesting in a dynamic like that. How do you navigate within a group? So relationships are really important in the game. One of the core systems is to really drive and establish relationship between Swann and each other character who are getting the closest to as adventure advances, who's getting close and becoming best friends, who maybe do you have a crush on. We are working with all those game dynamics in game, and you will discover the characters in two timelines in the past, in 1995, but also in 2022, when they are adults and they have to reconnect after not seeing each other for 27 years. And we feel that it was also very compelling to discover how can you reconnect with people. You've experienced something in the past, but you've grown apart. Are you still connected with them? Can you still be friends, or have you are you very different after life has passed? So, end quote. So basically, that's kind of like something that we were talking about, me and Adam, on StrangeCast, on Lost Records Journal and stuff like that, where I said to him like that time jump's so important. And he's going to really define, like, when people reunite. I said this on a lot of StrangeCast, where it's like that big jump. You're not the same person. Are you really going to be friends together? You might have shared so many experiences together, but things can really change. And again, it seems like you build relationships with different people. Again, big Oxenfree vibes as well. And I'm kind of liking it as well. I think it's a good pivot away from Life is Strange, where it's just two central characters and the rest of the relationships are forged around those two characters. And it's giving you, because that's the big task, if anything. It's a big task for Don't Know, and I'm very interested to see how they handle that, which is like that 4-character dynamic. Because like the last 4-character dynamic game I played, which was really, really good, in my opinion, and more so because of how they handled the dynamic, was Final Fantasy 15, which I played after a long period of time. And the way they handled Noctis and his boys, that was such an outstanding way that they handled it. And that game could have been so much more had it not been for development hell and everything else in between it. But you felt you could really forge a relationship with those characters. So it's like, I'm really wondering how this one goes as well, because it's going to have to be a lot of time is placed with each character in certain circumstances to make them either likable or dislikable. And again, you find that with Oxenfree. Play Oxenfree, it's a great game. It's like you can just walk through the screen, you just have someone be really petty, or someone comes across as this kind of way. All quite interesting. So I won't go on too much because we kind of talked about it in the Kotaku article. So anyway, next part, which was times have changed. They put here. So the idea of meeting group 27 years later after the mysterious event has transpired is certainly an intriguing one. As we explore Swann's memory in 1995 and switch to the present, in this case 2022, Koch explains that a quote-unquote huge aspect, end quote, of the game will be making choices in both timelines that will change the story in both the past and present. One example he gives me is that whether or not you decide to let Swann drink alcohol as a teenager, which will directly change the memories you experienced during that summer. Michel said, and I quote: when you play in the past memories, a lot of what you say and do will be directly changed the backstory in the past and the consequences in the present. So that's really interesting. That's quite an interesting dynamic. I wonder how that plays out. I wonder how ambitious this is. Like, this sounds really ambitious. I remember when they did the Detroit Become Human storyboard, the one that Quantic Dream made for that game. Like, it was so big. There was so much dialogue, so many scripts written, and it was such a great game as well. Actually, from Quantic Dream, like you play it and it's so meticulous in so many certain areas. Like, so you can lose so many characters. So quite interesting to see how they play that one out as well. And I like that again. Like, that feels like there's less illusion of choice for now, at least. We're not seeing the game yet, but I want like less illusion of choice and where things actually feel like they make impact in the game, or make they have something in there. So it's like, for example, if she drinks, what, like, that'll be quite interesting. Like, he says here, where it says here, which will directly change the memories you experienced during that summer. So that's quite, quite cool. Quite cool. Anyway, let's continue. With choice and consequence at the heart of the game, the team is quote unquote also quote unquote, putting more emphasis on the dialogue system, end quote. Alongside making choices at specific moments, Koch explains that there will also be more quote unquote naturalistic dialogue, end quote, that represents how it is to be part of a group. Michel said, and I quote, you in much more dynamic way will be able to interrupt, intervene, maybe decide to not say anything when the group is talking. And this will bring in a lot of choice and variation within the group and the relationship system with who you are getting close to. So we're using a lot of those two mechanics to drive all the choices and create branches in the narrative. And we'll talk at a later date about what you can do with the camcorder. But you are filming with the camcorder. You're filming with your camcorder. Will also play a part in the gameplay in the storytelling, but also sometimes in the branches of the game. End quote. So all interesting that again. I think like that was something we mentioned, which was about so you in a much more dynamic way will also be able to interrupt, intervene, maybe decide not to say anything when the group is talking. So me and Adam talked about, again, Oxenfree, we were saying like you can go the entire game without talking to anyone. It's funny, like you see the reactions that people give you in the game. And it's like, I think there's a trophy where you go the entire game without talking. So I like the fact that silence is an option. And that can play into it because, like, there was like, silence is an option in Telltale games, or silence in Oxenfree. It feels like the evolution of the dialogue system is going further, because I think like that was a great thing with the first Life is Strange. It's like you had all those choices, but sometimes you wish you could just be like silent, or you could do something completely different. You interrupt, you intervene. We had that again with, like, I can think of just an example where it's like, Kate Marsh with Dave Madsen. You can interrupt or you can not interrupt. But there's like still more opportunities you can explore, like development of it. So loving what I've read so far. So continuing, after setting the previous games in the Pacific Northwest, the team saw an opportunity to bring Lost Records to a fresh backdrop. Having recently moved to Canada to work at Don't Know Montreal, Koch was inspired to bring Swann's story to the quote-unquote shores of Lake Superior in the US, end quote, sorry, since she lives on the other side of Lake in Ontario later in life. Ontario? Ontario, Canada. By doing some research, the team were drawn to northern Michigan and law and community of the Eubler Peninsula, which Velvet Cove draws from. So while I can't wait to explore the fictional town and see how choices will impact both timelines, there's one particular moment in Swann's footage in Velvet Cove that caught my attention. A brief purple glow frames a shot as her camcorder lingers on curious circular graffiti. It immediately brings to mind the initial reveal trailer where we saw the mysterious light shine across the group's face. Something is going on. Something appears to be possibly hinting at supernatural kind of experience, since Bloomer Rage will have, quote unquote, the same kind of DNA, end quote, as Don't Know's previous games. Koch teaches that Michel teases that, quote unquote, there will be some sort of magic in the game, end quote, but that ultimately it will be a story about the characters first and foremost, quote unquote. We are trying to use darker magical elements to tell a better story about our characters, end quote. So again, kind of makes sense as well. And I'm kind of like glad that they're not focusing too much on sci-fi. I think we kind of had the reservations about like maybe going too sci-fi. And I like the fact that there's a supernatural element. It seems like from my ideas, if anything, and everything else in between, it feels like a Stephen King story inspired heavily this as well. It feels like there's a supernatural element, but the kind of main focus is on the characters. And I'm kind of like happy for that. If anything, I like the fact that we're kind of like focusing on the characters. The interesting backdrop as well feels very different from what we've seen in Life is Strange 1 and 2. Again, Adam was very much wrong with that. I can't wait to see what his reaction was with that as well. But like, got quite a nice setting there, if anything. And yeah, I'm kind of curious. Again, like that was an obvious. I think most people have seen the kind of like that weird moment towards the end of the trailer where it's like, it's going to become quite staticky, and you see the circle again. Like it feels like something's going to relate to that. But I do wonder how that's going to be affected by the other stuff as well. I do wonder if you can drink during that scene if you forget about it. I'm going to be boozing a lot in that game. So anyway, we'll come towards the end of this article, which is 2 parts. This was a really interesting part, if anything. Part of Life is Strange's DNA's episodic format, which Bloom Rage is also following, albeit in a slightly different way by releasing 2 parts with a month break in between. Both Michel and executive producer Luc Baghadoust speak fondly of the fan theories that cropped up during the release of each episode of Life is Strange, and by breaking Bloom Rage into 2 parts with not long of a wait time in between, the team hopes it will give us space to let the events of the story sink in, and possibly even bring together to theorize what will happen next. Not unlike the way, as Koch recalls, fans would discuss the events of Game of Thrones after the release of weekly episodes. Interesting. With Bloom Rage giving us the first taste for the new Lost Records universe, there are already plans to bring us future stories after Swann's, and as Dontnod's own IP, it's certainly exciting time for the studio and for narrow adventure fans. So this is Luke actually at the end of it with episodic games. What was really great was the opportunity to see how things go while you create them, and it brings new ideas and new stuff. And Michel and Jean-Luc Carnot, the writer on Life is Strange, who worked on Life is Strange as a writer, who worked on Bloom and Rage as a writer, already have amazing ideas for what will come next. I know more ideas will come along the way, and to me, that's one of the most exciting parts with this project. Bloom and Rage is the potential for what's coming next, end quote. So yeah, all very interesting. That was very interesting. The 2-part thing we learned as well, very different way. I think like this is truly the moment where we evolve episodic gaming, if anything. It feels like Don't Nod again is like doing that thing that me and Adam talked about, where it came in 2015, where like Telltale had established this episodic genre format. Everyone was doing it. And it kind of like shook it up quite a bit with the rewind mechanic. It was very different from what we saw in other games. And it feels like it's putting again down another placemat, because like True Colors was always very strange where it was in chapters. It felt like it was just inserted to kind of be a fan-pleasing moment instead of like just getting rid of it. If anything, it felt like True Colors was wanting to be AAA, but then kind of being held back by what was people would consider the Life is Strange DNA, or making it episodic or making it chapter-based. Not really needed. We saw it with Tell Me Why, where there was episodes being released every 2 weeks, I believe it was, like in a very short period. We saw it with The Expanse, where they were being released, I think it was weekly or something. I can't remember. It was very quickly, but the episodic period, I think that 5-episode structure, depending on the game, I just don't think you're going to see it in the same way. That really was a big burden for Telltale, and especially with like just in general, like look at the state of Telltale after doing the same thing again and again and again, repeating things. It just didn't work out for them. So I think with 2 parts, it makes sense. I imagine that my idea at the minute is going to be released monthly. So I think it'll be 1 month you get one game, and the other month you get the other game. That's my theory, if anything. Or you get like an October release and then December release for the second part. But I think like, it does seem like an interesting thing. Again, I think like that's also probably, if in my opinion, like I think they're trying to do it to build up marketing, because I think they want people to kind of be hyped up with it. That was something that really helped Life is Strange, remember, as well, when they're releasing episodic weekly. That was what took it to, monumental success as it was, because I remember the first Life is Strange and like a lot of the Life is Strange episodes, people weren't talking about it, but at one point it just like flew off and everyone was talking about it, everyone was buzzing off it. I was like, oh, it's got all of a sudden loads of popularity, which is quite interesting. So no, all quite interesting that with the 2-episode part, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they play out with that. That could be the new benchmark. That could be for their future games as well. That could be like the Lost Records DNA, as you would call it. So All good for that. And then obviously, again, we know that there's a franchise coming, like series coming. I do hope that, personally speaking, and this might be controversial, I do hope that Swann isn't just the main character for all of these games. I hope it's an anthology series, Lost Records. I hope that that is the universe, and I hope that you can basically have like maybe characters come and go in their own universe and stuff. But I don't necessarily just want it because, like, even though it's hitting all the Life is Strange 1 vibes, and we all love Life is Strange 1, I just don't want it just to be a Swann story throughout the entire thing. Like there's like 4 or 5 games with Swann, and it's just continuing on. I would love them to be as ambitious as they were with Life is Strange 2, when it got all the pushback it did, and even like with Square Enix just seeming to forget about its existence until every other couple of months, if not years. I would love them to do something as ambitious as that, something as bold as that, something that moves it completely away from the direction where it's like, it's the teensy kind of thing, it's the the Stranger Things meets Yellow Jackets meets this kind of thing, and it goes down a completely different route, and you kind of like, oh, actually, this is something different, because like I love Life is Strange. I've said this before. I think it was great for what it was, and I think like that was my always big complaint with when we went to True Colors with Deck 9, because it was like it felt like we were taking 3 steps back, because basically instead of going as ambitious, creating a different, like, creating this anthology series that Life is Strange is, and creating unique identities in it, Life is Strange True Colors just seemed to borrow so much from the first Life is Strange, and it felt like it's such a safe place to, like a safe play, if anything, because like Life is Strange 2 was very divisive. So I hope that going forward that they do really kind of tap into a universe where they create different stories, they create anthology stories, and then it makes this series really successful from that. And then, but like again, then I would like to see like Swann come back in the game. I'd like to see other people come back into a game. I wouldn't even mind, for example, if you had like one game which is that where it's Swann, you leave it and then go into a different character, and then you come back to Swann maybe 3 or 4 games later or something, and you can tell a story. There's room for them, which is again like they already know that anyway. They are an independent studio, don't nod. They've got their own publishing arm. They're making their own IPs, so again it creates like a rich vein of library for them. And the Game of Thrones thing was quite interesting as well. Like I think that again, I think that's more so just beyond like I think that's also marketing from my perspective. I think they really need to drive the marketing, because I've seen people's reactions. Some people like, I might pick it up, I might play it. That's quite an interesting position, because again, like, people might love the first Life is Strange, but might not be sold on this. So like, if you can basically get a couple of YouTubers or something to play it in between for like and stream it, and like a live stream, might transcend the popularity a little bit to other people. So all quite interesting. So that's the 2 articles we're covering. Again, I don't think we'll bring these up on the actual show. I think we've got 2 other articles. I think it's a Hardcore Gamer one, flashbacks there. that was my old stomping ground. A Hardcore Game one, and I think there's another one that I found as well, which we'll do on that. And I think like maybe Lost Records Journal later this month. I think I might even try and transcribe some of the video interviews I saw, because there's Rodriguez on there, Luc's on there, Michel's on there, so it's quite interesting to hear all their perspectives on it. So anyway, I'll kind of call it a day here, because we're coming towards like 40-50 minutes here. I don't want to go on for too long, but I'm really excited from what I've read. I can't really, again, I don't really have anything negative to say at the minute, or like anything bad, because it's like we're just getting really easy information here, and it seems like, I think if anything, I'll actually end this point, I think they're towing a line. We use towing a line a lot recently. They're towing a line very well on Life is Strange and Lost Records, because everyone's making the comparison with Lost Records and Life is Strange. It's this, and that. And they are obviously acknowledging the fact that they made Life is Strange 1 and 2 because it's a big part of the studio. It's got people who worked on those games working on Lost Records. It's borrowing a lot. It seems to be showing a lot of elements from those games, etc. But they're kind of making Lost Records its own thing. And that's what I'm really hoping for by the time I get to that game, because if it becomes too much like Life is Strange, and you're going to think I'm crazy here for someone who hosts this channel and stuff, I think I would be kind of a little bit like, I was hoping for more, because like, if you're trying a new IP, you're trying a new game, you're making something completely original, great, borrow your inspirations from other games, try those things. Kojima did it with Death Stranding. I love Kojima, my Kojima obsession. He did it with Death Stranding, but it was different from Metal Gear. It was a very different experience, and people were polarized by it, but I love that game. I thought it was one of the most original games in the last 10, 15 years. But anyway, on Lost Records, I want Lost Records to be its own thing. I want it to kind of be its own animal. I want it to really kind of like challenge what has happened with Life is Strange, and show what evolution is really meant to be like with Life is Strange, because Life is Strange has been like this constantly, up and down, up and down. I want this kind of be something refreshing, a new palate cleanser, and something that we all kind of walk away thinking, hey, those Life is Strange comparisons were too premature early on, but instead we should have been like, they actually have learned a lot from it. Because, for example, the dialogue, like, Michel said what he said in that, but I'm keen to see what it actually does, because I covered those games, and universally I remember thinking that every critic was like, the dialogue is cringe. And it was like, and I was like, yeah, and even I found it very hard to defend it, because even in my review, I was like, yeah, the dialogue is like, it is a bit cringe here and there. I enjoy it, but it's cringe, and it feels like the dialogue is being kind of held up by these actors who are really trying to make it a little bit more, um, try and make a good delivery out of it, if anything. But like, I'm just hoping that we see this. But it feels like things are going the right direction. It feels like things are going positive. So I'm kind of like going to end it on the high note. But as I said, I'm kind of hoping that we see more positive change. But as I said, we learned a lot more stuff in the other articles. We'll kind of go through those. And again, I'm looking forward to sitting down with Adam and talking about it. Me and him just talked over messages. So, and obviously StrangeCast, you guys can watch, and then you can kind of give your own opinions. But I hope you enjoy this video. Hopefully get it out by Friday. So, I've got a day to send this over. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you've read in the articles. There's a lot of things people have said. And thank you again to people who watch the trailer reaction. Really appreciate it. It's a very small YouTube channel, so any people put their eyes on the product is really great. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Again, one more time, if you are new here, please do consider dropping a subscribe on the channel, turn notifications, like the video, and share with your friends. Helps support the channel, helps keep us up to date at the channel. I do more content like this as well, because then it keeps you company. I know a lot of people come to the channel for content, so I hope you do enjoy it, if anything. And let me know in the comments what you think and some of the better tidbits that you got from the interviews and what you've heard. Obviously, we're going to be hearing a lot more of this. I don't think the game's going to come out until like October, November, December, probably October, November, in my personal opinion. But let me know what you think. And we're on social media as well. We're on Twitter, where you should definitely follow us. We're on TikTok. Please do follow us on TikTok. I had a very crazy experience. I uploaded a part of my interview with Kylie Brown on there, and it got more views than the YouTube video. I was so disheartened, because I wish people would watch it on YouTube. It'd be so much better. But anyway, yeah, please do follow us on TikTok, because we've got a small audience. I'm trying to build it as much as possible, and I probably will try and do more content on there. But yeah, let me know. Hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned. StrangeCast will be here next week, so I'm looking forward to dropping that. And then obviously Lost Records Journal will be back later this month. Until later, guys. See you later. Bye.